So you have caught me 11 sleeps out from the very first ever WBFF Australian Pro-Am. We are well and truly in the final straight. The finish line is in sight, and today I'm going through my very last leg session. Now, the fundamental reason why I stopped training legs around a week and a half out from competition is to reduce inflammation in my legs. A lot of build-up of blood, a lot of the metabolite work that I've been doing has meant that the legs can get rather inflamed, and as a result, no matter how lean you are, you may find that when you step on stage on show day, the legs are a little swollen and it gives off the perception that they lack condition. So today I'm going to go through a high volume metabolite focused workout. We're looking at higher rep schemes. We're looking at implementing supersets, trisets, drop sets, a wide variety and assortment of different overreaching principles and tactics which you can implement into your training regimen. Maybe towards the back end of a mesocycle if you're really looking to push through and progressively overload. I would very rarely do these sessions, but with 11 sleeps until show day, this is going to be grueling, but hopefully the fruits of my labour will be shown come October 13th. Kind of scared.
Coming alive. Heat of the night. Now is the time. Don't try to hide, 'cause I'm gonna harm you like Corona. I know you thought it was over. I know you thought it was finished. I know you think I'm a cynic.
Okay, so the first exercise on today's program is 45-degree hack squat. I'm looking at around 4 to 5 sets of 10 to 12 repetitions, and I'm looking at a 4-second eccentric. So in line with my focus on metabolite, high volume training, I'm really trying to emphasize time and tension. So I'll be doing a 4-0-1-0 tempo with these hack squats, which will be rather excruciating. This may mean that I need to reduce the loads that I would usually lift if I was following a more explosive program. But that's the nature of it. You can manipulate various program variables to elicit a desired response or outcome. In this particular instance, what we're trying to do is generate as much blood flow into the area, into the target muscles as we possibly can, and effectively we are training for the pump here. And usually I'm a big advocate of focusing on the quantitative and progressive overload, focusing on the numbers. Today will be very qualitative and feeling the burn. Find me a bucket. So when it comes to technique cues for this hack squat, I'm actually performing a narrow stance hack squat. Sort of been doing these religiously for the last 2 years to bring out the size definition in my vastus lateralis, so the outer quad sweep. Key word there is emphasize. You can't isolate, especially with an exercise like this. To suggest that the rest of the quad isn't being actively engaged is misguided. And it may only be a small or minor difference with the variation in foot position or foot stance, with the narrower duck foot sort of stance. But I think more than anything, as I place myself in this position, I'm consciously thinking about distributing my weight into the outer heel. I just think especially when you're working with high rep schemes and you're in a machine, you're capable of focusing on establishing that clear mind-muscle connection and really concentrating on placing the target muscle under the strain that is necessary in order to elicit growth, the tension that is required to elicit growth. I think often when you are on machines, there is the temptation to simply go through the motions, allow the sled to dictate the pace, allow the sled to dictate not only the pace / tempo, but also to take the load. And I think by concentrating on slowing down the eccentric, by just minor adjustments in terms of foot position, and psychologically minor adjustments in terms of how I approach each set, each rep, I'm able to get more from each rep, more productive reps. And I think often I can fall into the temptation of being so fixated on the quantitative, i.e. progressive overload, that often I can often forget that progressive overload and increasing volume is only relevant if the target muscle is actually placed under adequate strain or tension. So simply writing down a number but not actually having that number have relevance because you didn't actually properly apply yourself. It's just something to consider when it comes to your training, how focused and concentrated your effort is within the set, performing each rep, making sure that each rep counts and not counting each rep. So at this stage of the game, about a week and a half until show day, calories are low, the risk of catabolism, losing all the lean muscle mass that I built during the off season increases exponentially with all the energy expenditure, the low calories. So to retain that lean muscle mass, obviously keeping protein high through whole foods, but then supplementing intra-workout with branched chain amino acids. So it helps to enhance recovery, and obviously looking to avoid any of the pitfalls that occur with aggressive dieting. So next up we have a superset. I'm going to actually perform an isolation exercise with leg extensions before moving into a compound exercise like leg press. So with the superset, no rest between each exercise. As soon as I finish up with the leg extension, I immediately walk over to the leg press and I move into that. So I'm looking at around 12 to 15 repetitions with the leg extensions, and anywhere between 10 to 12, 12 to 15 repetitions with the leg press. So again, high volume, high repetition. By the end of these 5 sets, I should be well and truly pumped. For the first 2 sets, I'm actually going to point my toes in, focus on vastus lateralis, and then when I move over to the leg press, I'll keep my stance narrow, again, to emphasize the vastus lateralis. For the forthcoming 2 sets to follow, I'm going to be focusing on VMO, toes pointed out, and I'll just do a standard leg press with a wider stance as opposed to a narrow stance on the leg press. So for this last set, toes just pointed normally parallel. What I'm going to be doing is a drop set, because it is my final set of this particular superset. So I'm going to rep out my 12 to 15 repetitions on the working weight that I've selected, and then once I reach muscular failure, what I'm going to do is reduce the load that I'm lifting to around 60 to 70% of what I was lifting, and then I'll rep that out until failure, until I then hop over to the leg press. I'll perform as many reps as I possibly can on the working weight that I've selected, and then from there I'm going to then perform a drop set where I will reduce the plates on either side, hop back on the machine and rep out until failure. This is an overreaching principle or tactic which you should use sparingly. I wouldn't advocate using this every session. It should be used at, say, the end of a monthly training block, 4 to 6 week training block, as a means of progressive overload, but it shouldn't be your go-to, because what will inevitably happen is if you try to do this session to session, week on week, your fatigue will inevitably catch up with you and your performance in the gym will deteriorate, volume will go down. So it's an overreaching principle that will necessitate a active recovery or deload week to follow. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Let's go. So it's incredibly important during any workout really to remain as well hydrated as you possibly can, both during the workout and actually, to be perfectly honest, throughout the entire day. And I think it's one of those, you know, staple health tips which get regurgitated time and again from the very outset, yet people choose to forego this mandatory fundamental. In terms of water when it comes to a competition prep, I've mentioned time and again that water can help in terms of dietary compliance, and if you're dealing with hunger issues, it can certainly help it. Water also helps in terms of the external appearance or the aesthetic of the physique. As you get leaner, water plays a critical role in terms of hydrating the muscles to make them appear fuller. You know, the intramuscular water retention coupled with things like glycogen from carbohydrates actually makes your muscles look full. So water is your friend. And in the lead up to a competition, my water intake is quite high. Not only satisfying hunger levels, but also just to get that muscle fullness and also to regulate my water levels. So in the lead up to a competition, I might find that I go to the bathroom a whole lot more frequently than I usually would be accustomed to, and that's because I'm just trying to constantly drink water and then flush it out, drink water, flush it out. And because if you retain water as a result of your body not having enough water, you can find yourself appearing to be, you appear as though you're out of condition. So making sure that you're drinking plenty of water throughout the day, but also during the workouts to enhance performance. If you're dehydrated during a workout, your performance will be diminished, and if you're on next to no calories at the moment in the lead up to a competition, the last thing that you can afford is any other drawbacks that can be associated with a deterioration in your training performance. So be mindful of your water intake. Alright, so we are now going to move on to hamstrings. We're going to do a superset, starting off with dumbbell Romanian deadlifts before moving into hamstring curls. With the Romanian deadlifts, I'm going to have my toes elevated, and the fundamental reason for that is to get a greater stretch through my hamstrings. I find that this one small technique change by elevating the toes can actually lead to a better stretch through the hamstring as I take it through a full range of motion. So looking at a 3 to 4 second eccentric phase for the Romanian deadlifts. When performing the hamstring curls, I'm conscious that I'm already under fatigue, so I'm going to lighten the load, pressing my hips into the padding to ensure that all the tension is placed through the target muscle and not depending on any other secondary muscle or the momentum of the machine to bring the weight up. Alright, last but certainly not least, we're going to finish off with a tricep. That's 3 exercises done back to back to back. Starting off with 1 1/4 kettlebell goblet squats. I can't believe I prescribed this particular exercise for myself at the end of this particular workout, but 1 1/4 goblet squats, 10 to 12 repetitions. Then we're gonna move into dumbbell walking lunges, 12 to 15 reps each leg. As soon as I finish off with the dumbbell walking lunges, I then move on to the prowler, and we're looking at 40 meters worth of prowler drive and pushing. And that's 1 set. 11 sleeps until the very first ever WBFF Australian Pro-Am. My final leg session of this prep is done, and boy am I happy about it. Guys, if you enjoyed this week's video, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Read the description below to find out how you can go in with a chance to win a free tub of OXYSHRED. Until next time, guys, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.